Good morning and welcome to Driving Force Radio, where we seek to discover each and every week what drives today's leaders. My co-host today is the fabulous Cristin Tarr, founder and managing director of Business Service Corps, an organization based here in Denver who is focused on helping businesses and nonprofit organizations come together and really create social change and social good. Welcome to the show, Cristin.
Thank you so much.
It is always so fun to do these shows with you, these Community Matter shows, because you bring such a different perspective to what's going on in our communities. And it's never just a nonprofit. We're talking about creating this larger social change. So what are we talking about today?
It's going to be a wonderful show because we have a couple guests on to talk about the responsible generation.
What does that mean?
It means any person that's born around 1985 and later that are coming into the workforce, and they're in the workforce right now. They're probably about 30 in the mid-30s right now, and they are looking for different types of responsibility that the corporations are doing within their organization. And the show is going to be interesting because we're going to hear about millennials, as they call them. A lot of mature workers are really frustrated with these millennial workers.
How so?
Because they're different. They think differently. They work differently. And we're going to bring in two guest students that you're going to hear from them, but you're also going to hear from a university and what they're doing to prepare these students. And then later, really exciting, we're going to have an employer that really embraces the younger generation. And maybe we can learn a little bit from what they're doing. Oh,
I love that. I love that. Our first guest is Rena Dulberg, the Director of Community Service and Leadership Programming at the Denver campus of Johnson & Wales. She works with students and faculty to really highlight the intersection of academics and civic engagement and industry leadership. Thanks for being with us, Rena.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Rena, you know, Johnson & Wales is well known here in the Denver metro area, and I think people just really liken Johnson & Wales to a culinary institute.
Right.
But there's so much more going on there. Can you tell us a little bit about Johnson & Wales and your role at the campus?
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, Johnson & Wales is well known for its culinary program, but we actually have a variety of majors available to students on campus. So we also have students studying business, hospitality in general, and related fields, so everything from hotel lodging to food and beverage and so on and so forth. And then, of course, culinary, which also includes baking and pastry students as well as nutrition students. So it really kind of runs the gamut. And we've been in Denver about 10 years. We're actually part of a 4-campus system that is headquartered in Providence, Rhode Island. And here in Denver, we have about 1,400 to 1,500 students.
Wow. And so what is your role there?
So my role as Director of Community Service and Leadership Programming, as was mentioned earlier, is really to be the hub where campus, community, and industry all come together. So that sort of manifests in a variety of ways. I work closely with faculty to help integrate civic engagement and sort of community-based learning projects into their courses and into their curriculum. I also teach a community impact and leadership development course on campus, and just work individually with students to help them identify places where their professional skills and sort of their social interests and values come together.
Wow. And what are the students looking for right now in jobs?
Yeah, well, you know, I meet with a lot of students on a daily basis, and I think one thing they all have in common is that they're going through a process of sort of self-identification. So who am I both personally and professionally? And a trend that I've really seen over the last several years is that students are trying to find ways to bring those two aspects of themselves together. So how can I sort of blend my personal values and what's important to me in the community with what I want to do as a career? So I think what that means sort of in practical terms for their future workforce and for their future careers is that they're looking for companies that are socially responsible, that they can sort of put together this idea of doing well by doing good. And really, I mean, most of the students that I meet with reject this idea that I can only do good outside the workplace, that that's some sort of after hours activity. But no, they want to work at a company that allows them to do that while they're at work.
Kind of a work-life balance.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing that as we go forward, especially here in probably the last decade. You've really seen that shift as those big employers have kind of shifted to that mentality, the Facebooks, the Googles, those kinds of organizations. Yes. Rena, talk about some of the factors that are contributing to the belief that these young people can do well but still do good at the same time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that there are a couple factors. I'll sort of maybe highlight two that come to mind. One is that we're seeing a shift, I think, in corporate America towards more sort of socially responsible or sustainable initiatives. And so students are paying attention to those kinds of trends in business. And especially as I think it becomes more socially acceptable for businesses to talk about what they're doing in the community, to make that more visible, whether it's on their website or wherever, to just tell the story of their community impact. Students, especially business students, are really following those trends. So it's not particularly hard for them to realize or sort of come to this realization that there are options and that some companies are sort of on this track with this new trend and other companies aren't. So they're learning about it that way. And I would say that there's also some trends in education that, as you mentioned earlier, are helping to shape students' worldviews in this way. And so there's something called service learning that's kind of a widely used practice in educational settings that comes to mind, which is a form of community service that's used to reinforce academic learning. And so I think as students become more engaged in the community in school, they take what they know or what they've learned about the community with them into the workplace, and they're much more aware of the types of impacts that are possible.
Sure.
And I think it starts really young, as probably your kids and my kids
Yep.
are in elementary school, and they're raising money for wells
Right.
in Africa. They are walking around the neighborhood, pennies for projects, and so they're already socially conscious at a very young age, very different than the earlier generations.
Right.
And so they're expecting that in the workforce. And
Right.
and do you think that they can be selective? Do they have the opportunity? I know right now the economy is just coming back, and the future, where do you think that's taking it?
Well, I think that's a really common perception, is that this can be seen, especially because they're millennials and they have these other reputations of sort of being different than other workers that might be out there in the workplace, that it can be seen as sort of they're being too picky about where they work, and is that really realistic? But I actually think that it absolutely is, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is that this is becoming sort of something that gives a lot of companies market share advantage. And so I think it's actually really smart of students to use this as an evaluative criteria to say, I want to work at a company that understands where their role is in the workplace, how community impact and social responsibility plays into that, and I can make some predictions about how successful they might be in the long run based on their engagement, and I want to be at a successful company. I mean, I don't think that's being picky, that's sort of being strategic, right, about your career goals. So I think that that's actually a really fair criteria for a lot of people to be using, and of course there has to be some sort of basic livable, option that students are choosing between. So we're not talking about, working for free necessarily, but given some basic criteria that's in place, I think this can become a really important way to evaluate a company.
There's a recent study that said if salary and benefits are acceptable,
Sure.
what are the criteria? And responsibility comes up at one of the highest. In fact, at a recent Net Impact conference, it was just filled with top talent. And many of them were choosing not to take on professions and go into entrepreneurships, because social entrepreneurships, because they felt like they wanted to blend that. And do you see that as an interest with some of your students?
It definitely is, and I think one of the things that students in this generation are really all about is not having to choose between things at all, and really believing that there's more that's possible. And social entrepreneurship is a great example of sort of a hybridization of what may be sort of more traditional ideas of what business is and what, how to impact the community. So social enterprise and social entrepreneurship is something that's sort of emerging as a blended concept that our students are really embracing and saying, I can kind of have it all. I can do good and do well at the same time, be my own boss if I want to, and have some autonomy, which is another value that's really important to this younger generation.
Yeah. I love that, and I can completely buy into that whole conversation, because so many of the organizations that we work with here at ICOSA and at Driving Force are those kinds of organizations. They are those social enterprises that are doing well, yet still doing good. Rena, I have to ask, the hospitality industry is fairly, it's laden by its own definition, I think, historically. Is the hospitality industry really changing that perception? And are they moving towards more sustainable initiatives and more socially positive things? What do you see in there?
I think that we are seeing that shift happening, and I would say there's a lot of industries that are going through this process of sort of self-evaluation and what could we do. So I think a really common example in the hospitality industry, if we look at hotels specifically, I can't remember the last time I was at a hotel where I didn't see a little card in the bathroom about what to do with my towel if I wanted it to be washed or not. And that's really about water conservation and environmental sustainability. So that's a very small, succinct example, and there's much more that folks in the hospitality industry can do, but that's becoming more commonplace, I think, and it's almost an expectation that customers begin to have of that industry. So I think that they are beginning to do more, but I think I would emphasize that really any industry has that option. So it's starting to become more common in hospitality, but any organization can take a look at what they do and just, I would really say, look for the intersections of where there's a community or an environmental impact, and then see that as an opportunity.
So Rena, we have a couple of students from Johnson & Wales here. What specifically at Johnson & Wales are you guys doing with students?
Well, we're doing a lot, which is really exciting. Education's going through a similar shift of sort of what can we be doing to get students more civically engaged. So the course that I teach actually about sort of community impact is one really important thing that I think is exposing students to this combination of professional skills and community impact. So there's more courses like that, I think, popping up across the country, and certainly within Johnson & Wales, focused on leadership and corporate social responsibility and how all of those things are related. We also have a very robust service learning program where we're putting out many students every year to do multiple hours of service, 10 each at least, but sometimes much more than 10 hours per student to do work in the community that links back to their academic goals, of course. But I mean, the impact just in Denver alone, I think that can bring to our community is really huge, and we're always looking for organizations to partner with in that way. So I think higher education is really starting to see itself as less disconnected from the communities in which it's embedded, and see it as more of a partnership, just like companies are doing.
And perhaps these students can teach the companies that they're working for a little bit more, moving towards the trend of corporate social responsibility, and really being making a difference in the community, but making community matters. So, you know, a combination of that, they can be. And do you see that? Do you see that the students are influential?
Absolutely. We talk a little bit I talk with my students often about managing up and sort of the skill of managing up, which is a wide skill that's, you know, transferable across any industry, but it matters for corporate social responsibility, so that if students find themselves in an organization that may be less progressive or less sort of on track with the trends that we've talked about around corporate social responsibility, they are developing a skill set where they're able to express their opinion and have some influence over the organizations that they're in.
Well, Rena, I want to thank you so much for being here today and representing Johnson & Wales.
Thank you.
We want to switch gears and talk to some of your students now. Becky and Naja are going to be joining us, but thank you for being with us,
Thank you for
Rena.
having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we're switching gears right now. You know, we had such a great talk with Rena about the work Johnson & Wales is doing, but now we get to see the work in action. And we're now going to welcome Becky Lindberg and Naja Walker to the show. Welcome, Becky.
Hi.
Thank you. Welcome, Naja. Becky, can you tell us a little bit about what you're studying and what your career goals are?
Yes, I'm a senior at Johnson & Wales University, and I'm studying culinary nutrition. So my career goals are I'll graduate in May, and I'm hoping to get into a dietetic internship for this next fall, and pass my registered dietitian exam and maybe work in a hospital, or I have an emphasis in sports nutrition, so maybe even work at a collegiate team somewhere in the United States. So those are my goals right now.
That's awesome, Becky. And Naja, what about you? You're in a very different program.
Yeah, I'm a fashion merchandise and retail marketing major. And my future career goals is to be a CEO of my own Fortune 500 company.
I love that. I love that.
Good. And how we talked a little earlier about corporate social responsibility. You're learning it at school. You're learning it in your daily lives, and you're experiencing it. How important is that to the employer that you are going to be looking to be employed by? And of course, if you have your own company, how important is it to you having it as kind of a fundamental part of your organization? Becky, do you want to tell us?
Sure. I think since my major is culinary nutrition, I've also been able to work in kitchens and different things like that, and I also want to work in a hospital. So for the culinary side, to me, I kind of look for are we recycling? Are we composting? Are we just wasting food? What is the impact we're having? That's a pretty big deal. I did work a job here in Denver, and it really upset me because they weren't recycling like number 10 cans, and they weren't recycling food, and we were wasting a lot. So that did really kind of affect one of my decisions to stay or not stay. So I really do think it's important to look at like what in the culinary world, the food at like the environment,
sources.
the sources of food as well. So, and then more on the nutrition side, I guess to me, I would kind of want to look for something where we're taking the nutrition knowledge we have and like giving it back to the community. And since childhood obesity is so huge in America, maybe there's something we're affecting that, or maybe we're doing health clinics for different high blood pressure and things like that. So giving back to the community using the skills we have, that's what I like to look for in a company I'm going to work for.
Becky, I love that. How about you, Naja? You're in a different side. You're more in the textile side of things and fashion and clothing and things like that. There's been a lot in the news about where things are sourced from and how things are made. Does that affect your decision as well?
It does. It has a big impact on my decision. The fashion industry is one of the largest industry that has
Human rights and
labor laws, and we all know that there are some factories and companies that companies use in foreign countries that aren't abiding by these labor laws.
Is that quite important to you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah. I can imagine that. Why do you think corporate responsibility has really elevated? Has it been part of your life for a long time? And is it important enough to you to choose not to work for an organization that is not practicing this?
Yeah, I think to talk about why it's elevated, growing up, I'm sure both me and Naja can attest to this too, is we're kind of told like when you're going through college or going through elementary school and high school, when you're getting ready to apply for college, like what have you done for the community? You need to have all this information, you need to have a good resume, you need to have community service to apply to colleges. So it's we're almost kind of like told you need to have a good background with community service, and I think that is different than from generations before us, because it's not to say it wasn't competitive, but it wasn't as competitive to get into different schools and colleges and things like that. So I think that's kind of like a building block, like you were told you had to have this to get further in life. And now when you're in college and you're doing these community services and going out in the community for classes and things, I think we're understanding that it's not like what it used to be. We're teaching someone else something we know. It's more of like a double learning process. So I think that's why it's elevated. And going on the other question about if I would choose a company, I think I would choose if I had equal companies, I would choose a company that was more so responsible, just because that would be something that fits into my morals and that I would want to work for. And I'd probably be happier at that company as well.
So Naja, coming to you, how does CSR, how does corporate social responsibility play into your decision making as you go out into the workforce and get out there?
Well, I came from a less fortunate background, so there's always some companies that come back to my community and give back. So I just want to keep the cycle going. That's why it's important to me, because someone helped me in my lifetime as I was a child, so I want to get back and help someone else. Plus, a company just seeking capital gain, that isn't really fulfilling to me. When you're in the community and you want to give back and reach back to a child in need, that's more fulfilling to me.
So Naja, then, do you believe, I agree with you, and I come from a similar background. Would you agree then that the generation feels strongly about CSR for those kinds of reasons, that people see it and experience it, or is it just this trend? What do you think?
I think it's the new normal, in my opinion. It's not a trend. There are things that are affecting us every day. So we need to think about those things for the future. Water may not be completely dirty now, but 30 years from now, if we don't take care of it, what are we drinking? What's in our water? Animals may not be extinct now, but 30 years from now, where are they going to be? Who's feeding them? Are they going to be still going to be around?
And I think that's a really good point, because we're building conscious capitalists.
Yes.
And they're expecting that in the workplace. This is what the next stage is. Do you think that you are unusual in your generation, or do you think that this generation is, Becky, you can probably talk about some of your other students that you live. Did they live and breathe this?
Yeah, I think so. I was actually just able to listen to a speaker, Tammy Dorr, and she's great. She was very interesting to listen to, and she had a whole presentation about managing millennials, and I really don't think we're the norm, I think we are the norm, not the exception. And I definitely think at Johnson & Wales and schools all over the place, the community service is becoming part of the classroom. And I think students are really enjoying it, and maybe not at first, they're kind of hesitant, but I think once you experience it, more and more students are going to want to do it again and again and again.
Right. And we know that this is one of the largest, this is the largest generation coming in. It's even larger than the baby boomers. So it's a change agent that will happen. And how comfortable do you think you'll be in a workplace when you see that they're not doing some of the things that you are expecting them to do? Would you be willing to speak up, Naja?
Yes, I would be very uncomfortable, and it would determine if I want to stay there or not. There are more companies out there now, so we have options. So why would we put up with this in this working place when we can go somewhere else and be satisfied completely?
In addition, you can also start your own business. Is that
exactly?
Well, Naja, I know that we were told by Johnson & Wales that recently you won a very prestigious business plan award. Can you talk a little bit about that and what came from that?
Yes. So I entered into the social business competition, and my business plan was basically a cupcake company that was geared towards social change and social awareness. The decoration on the cupcakes would, inspire awareness on different causes and issues throughout the world. So that led to me winning that competition, led to a full ride to the Greater Good Academy with Richard Eden, I believe his name is. And so that was awesome because I got to meet a lot of great people, and they have a lot of great ideas, and the world is changing. Yeah. The world is changing. It really is.
And I think that's just that example right there, Jan. And Becky, maybe you can add to this a little bit, is that when you see that instead of just making the money, which is important. I mean, we all have to make money in order to sustain ourselves. But if that's taken care of, that there's other interests that are out there. And is there anything that you've done in your career or your student life at Johnson & Wales that you can tell us about that you really got involved in and that you felt compassionate about?
I got involved with the Colorado AIDS Project here in Denver, and working as a nutrition demonstration chef, and just teaching them like how to reuse food, and just taking different things from the food pantry staple items, and that's kind of where my passion lied with that. So I took something that that they're like helping other people, and then I can come in and use my knowledge from school and teach classes for people who are a little less fortunate or a little less knowledgeable about the culinary nutrition skills. Yeah.
And if we know anything about the millennials, the younger generation, they won't stay at an organization unless they feel content and satisfied and inspired. And I think that the two of them really talk about where they're leading and where they need to go. And if corporations aren't listening, they need to start listening now, or else they're going to find that they're not going to be able to fill the workplace. So
yeah, it's not going to remain competitive. It sounds like for either one of you ladies that you're out there and that you want to create your own strategies and your own business so that it fulfills your soul as well as your pocketbook, and both things that are very admirable. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. So ladies, going forward, what are your plans? You're graduating in May. Yes. It sounds like, Becky, what's next?
What's your dream job?
What's my dream job? My dream job would be to be working with a collegiate team somewhere in the Midwest. That's where I'm from. So I'd love to work there, and even maybe even start a catering company, and maybe use that to help do some social responsible things in the community. So we'll see what happens.
Well, Becky, good luck on that. Naja, how about you?
Well, my dream job is to create my own dream job. Well, to create my own company. I'm not impressed with the corporations that are out here now. So I would have to say somewhere in fashion, and of course, incorporating a social aspect is almost unconscious for me. So some social fashion industry development, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, Naja Walker, good luck to you on that, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Becky Lindberg, thank you so much for being with us, and good luck to you as well.
Thank you.
And Cristin, this has been a great segment about really this new responsible generation that's coming through. And as we go forward in this next segment, we have another great guest.
Yes, and it's an interesting conversation to have after we hear these students is learning about a workplace that actually is implementing a lot of things for the next generation. And Snooze Restaurant in here in Denver, and I'm really excited to have Adam Schlegel here for the interview. So he'll be here shortly.
All right, sounds great. To learn more about Johnson & Wales University, go to jwu.edu/Denver. That's jwu.edu/Denver. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more with Driving Force Radio.